I'm Monica Neubauer,
And I'm Mark Neubauer.
and this is an open conversation. Actually, this is the beginning of an open conversation.
Yeah.
Yes, we want to introduce our new podcast to you. Gosh, so much to say. I guess that's why we called it an open conversation. All right. Why are we doing this podcast?
Well, I think because we have seen how in our culture today, people are staying in their echo chambers of social media and just throwing out sound bites and not really talking, not really having a conversation, not really trying to learn. They're just trying to reinforce what they already know. So this is about learning.
It's about learning because that's really what we're about. And we're going to share our story a little bit and how our ability to converse together has helped us in our marriage and in our life. So we'll get into that in just a minute. But let's talk about what is a conversation.
Yeah, you're asking all the questions and I'm doing all
You're-
this.
I thought about that too. I thought, well, I need to be answering. Well, okay, so we.
So- All right, I'll go ahead.
you,
So
you go ahead and then I'll fill in.
it's really about talking to another person or persons and trying to learn from them and trying to understand them, letting them be heard and you be heard as well. So
Gosh, lots of good concepts in that. Talking to another person with the goal of learning something.
Yes.
Not just talking at somebody, but talking with somebody.
right.
And then allowing them to be heard
Yes.
and hopefully yourself being heard as well.
Yeah.
Although there's some give and take with that sometimes. Sometimes we decide I'm just going to listen to this other person and see what they say. But it's also about listening, isn't it?
It's totally about listening.
Yeah.
It's I don't think you can be a good conversationalist without being a lifelong learner,
Well, without being a listener.
and a listener. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, learning and listening is you can't learn without listening.
You'll find as you hear Mark and I talk, you'll be able to tell when we are listening to each other or when we're just talking. Right?
Yes, exactly.
You will.
Yeah, just because we're doing open conversation doesn't mean we're always have perfect conversation.
Right, exactly. Oh my gosh, exactly right. All right, our story, and this is kind of like, why do Mark and Monica feel like they have the right to host a podcast about conversation? And that really is our story. We've been married 33 years, and we have 2 grown children. But when our children were small, we made a commitment to have conversation. And that came about because we've been very focused on learning about ourselves. We've done the DISC profile, the Enneagram. We're all about personality profiles, so we'll talk about that down the road. But in this situation, we were working with love languages. And Mark is a pretty strong introvert. Some people don't think he's an introvert because he's such a good conversationalist, but he is a pretty strong introvert, and I am a pretty strong extrovert.
Yeah.
Right?
Pretty much just figure out 2 opposite personality
Yes.
types, and then you've got us.
Right. And I'm very much about business and problem solving, and Mark is very creative and contemplative, and he's an artist. So we're different in.
Yes, existential philosophy.
That's
would
what
be more my thing.
Yeah, and I can have some existential conversation for about 15 minutes and I'm done.
Well, that's why I have other friends.
That's
who-
why you have other friends
do
to have
deep
good
dives with
conversation.
me, yeah.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
So we did the love language, 5 love languages by Gary Chapman. If you haven't read it, it's a good tool for self-discovery. And what are the 5 love languages?
Words of affirmation, touch, acts of service,
Quality time,
quality time, and
gift giving.
gift giving. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one we neither of us have.
Kinda
But our
grateful
daughter
about that
does.
then.
Well, but our
Oh,
daughter
yeah, that's
does,
the
so
other
we
thing
need
too,
to-
because we
yeah.
don't get to practice on each other. So we
Yeah.
got to step it up with our friends and family members who
Yeah.
do have that.
So Mark's love languages are acts of service and touch. And my love languages is quality time and words of affirmation. So again, we're opposite.
Yeah.
Well, Mark likes the house really, really neat. He likes everything neat. He's not OCD, but he definitely likes things in order. And everything where it's supposed to go. And he says, and this is true, I mean, it really is true, I think, for all of us to varying degrees, that too much clutter just clutters up your mind, makes it hard for you to focus on stuff.
Yeah.
And that's true for me. I mean, I could tolerate more clutter, but I get to a point where, I got to fix this. So for 15 years, we fought about how to keep the house clean. Well, even picked up, right?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And when we did the love languages and we focused on it, his love language being acts of service, what that looked like to him was a clean house, a clean garage. He would fill up my car with gas. There's things that's another conversation, but
Yeah.
what are acts of service? So there were certain things that he felt loved, certain acts of service. And I needed quality time. I needed conversation. I like to talk things out. I'm a verbal processor, so I need to talk things out to help me make progress in my thought processes. Tell us what an internal processor does. Mark's an internal processor.
Well, we just think about it a lot. So when we're trying to come up with a solution to a problem or thinking through strategy, like I would, at least early on in our marriage, I would just, think about a possible solution. If it didn't work, I'd just throw it out and I'd just go on to the next one. And
So Mark would have his list of options in his mind, and he'd cross them out, and then he'd toss them out.
Yeah.
So then you'd come back to me and do what?
Well, then you'd say, well, how did you come to that conclusion? And I'd say, well, I've been thinking about it for 2 weeks. I can't really remember,
I've been thinking about it for 2 weeks. That right, they don't drive me nuts. I thought about for 10 minutes, that was too long. All right, so he would think about it and he'd come back and I'd say, how did you get to that decision? Because it's kind of like doing the math.
Yeah.
You want to show your math.
Yeah.
Show me how you got to the answer.
Yeah.
And unlike math, when you're problem solving, there are many ways to get there. And so looking at the process is so important because I may agree with 90% of what you did or what you thought, but I don't agree with your conclusion.
Right.
Right. So I told Mark, I said, that's not okay. You need to figure out the process. So what did you do to start remembering the process?
Well, sometimes I would literally write it down. So I would, try to, I'd spend some time thinking about my thought process before you would ask me about it. And then I would write down how I came to that conclusion. And
So you prepared yourself for the conversation.
yeah, but it was
Cool.
helpful for me too. So
Was it?
yeah,
It was good
Yeah.
to see what you had done.
Yeah.
And that would allow me to insert my ideas into your process, right?
right. Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay, so for me, with quality time, I wanted conversation. So how are we going to fix that? So we have Mark's need for acts of service, and we made a deal. And he said, I need to have these 2 rooms be as neat as possible, way neater. I mean, he probably still had to go around behind me a little bit, but he said, Monica, I need you to pay attention to the clutter in these rooms. And so I agreed in these 2 rooms, I was going to be very focused on the clutter and put things away. And
By
so
the
that
way, we get some clutter in those 2 rooms right now.
we
I
do
mean,
have some clutter in those 2 rooms.
I'm starting to get a little stressed.
I understand. I'll deal with that after we record this. I understand it's actually bugging me now too.
Yeah.
All right. So the deal was I would deal with the clutter that was mine, and his part of the deal was he would sit with me. We would have conversation every evening. We would put our kids to bed, and they were fairly small. I mean, elementary school or maybe middle school. I don't know. Probably younger than 10. And we would put them to bed. And we always put our kids to bed pretty early. So 7:30,
Yeah.
certainly 8 at the latest. And then we would go downstairs and have some conversation. We'd get our favorite beverage. We wouldn't watch TV. We wouldn't put on social media. We'd have some tea or a beer, a glass of wine, whatever, and sit and just have conversation together
Yeah.
and talk about things for an hour. That was our commitment, was we were going to have conversation for 1 hour. Now, it didn't always have to be for an hour. And if you want to try this, fine, start with a half an hour.
Yeah.
I talk about this in public. Sometimes I tell this story when I teach classes, and some people's eyes get really big in their head at the thought of talking to maybe anybody, but even their spouse for an hour. So if you need to start with a half an hour and you want to do this, feel free.
Yeah. It's a learned skill though, too. So it doesn't come naturally and easily, especially if you had two people that were internal processors or two people that are
Oh, yeah.
introverts.
Oh, right.
Forget about it.
Yeah,
It's
they're
kinda-
going to definitely need to train themselves how to verbally communicate better.
And maybe they don't make an hour their goal, maybe half hour, or whatever.
Maybe they could pass notes to each other.
Did you say you had some clients that actually would send
And you-
messages on their laptops and they're like, they're sitting in the same room?
And they would text each other sitting beside each other on the bar, and they would text each other. That cracks me up.
We're in trouble.
Oh boy. Anyway, okay, so when it first started, did we just sit down and have, oh, this great, easy hour of conversation? Well, not always. Sometimes we would. Of course, you could always talk about your day, what's going on with your day. How did you feel about your day? Oh, feelings. That came further down the line. Feelings. Feelings.
And now it's the space I live in almost continually.
I
so-
know. It's actually more of who you are. You just didn't really, you
Right.
had to grow into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tap that reservoir.
So we didn't start with feelings. So just so you know, you don't have to start with the heavy stuff.
That's the good stuff.
It is the good stuff, but it takes some time to get there because we want to feel safe in our relationships and sharing things and learn how each other receives it.
Again, a learned skill though.
A
I
learned
mean,
skill,
you-
being able to give and receive feelings.
Well, even learning the names of the feelings, like people can't even recognize that. A lot of times when I talk to people, it's like, well, what are you feeling? Are you feeling sad? Are you feeling depressed? Are you feeling anxious? Just learn all the words of the feelings. Undervalued. That was one of the ones. I used
Undervalued. I know you
the other
used that
day.
last week.
I
You felt
know.
undervalued. I was really impressed, actually.
But I was naming the feelings I thought you might be feeling as well.
Right.
And so that was,
Well, the interesting thing, since Mark brought up the feelings, I'll say that when we got to feelings, after having conversations for several years, one of our therapists said, specifically to Mark, you've got to learn to address your feelings,
Yeah.
call them out, learn, figure out what you're feeling. And he gave us one of those feelings charts. There's magnets that you can download them.
Yeah.
That gave name to all our feelings. Even look at all the emojis that we have now. We didn't have emojis when we learned how to express our feelings, but you just said a bunch of the words. Use better words to define. Am I feeling anxious? Am I feeling disappointed? Am I surprised, delighted, embarrassed? So many more words for feelings.
I still want to get that. My favorite one of that was Calvin and Hobbes.
Calvin and Hobbes feelings.
The
chart.
Yes, it was just Calvin's face, and because he was,
So
his
expressive.
expressions were so like, that was what made Calvin and Hobbes so good.
If we can find Calvin and Hobbes facial expressions, we'll
Oh,
link it in
sure.
the show notes.
Yes, yeah.
Yes, we'll link it in the show notes. All right. So anyway, we're having the conversation and we would talk about our day, talk about our kids. Eventually you need to get past that. But we also used one of those question boxes to help us think about what we might want to say. Questions like, oh, would you rather jump out of a plane or go up in a hot air balloon? Right? I mean, sometimes they start really light.
Yeah.
And you can buy books like that. They have boxes. We have something on our website. You can buy our list of questions that we've put together in a downloadable format because these questions really do help. And even to this day, we
Yeah.
still use them because when we go out to eat,
Yeah.
we still need some help. We talk about so much. Sometimes we need some help now, right?
Or sometimes we've been talking so much and processing so much, even like throughout the day, that get to the end of the day and you're like, wow, I think we've talked about everything.
We talked about, yeah. So now sometimes we give ourselves freedom to watch TV because we actually had conversations in the morning and conversations at lunch because we actually are both at home a lot. We both work out of the home. So, all right. So we had an hour conversation in the evening after our kids went to bed. No TV, no social media until after. And I kind of want to speak to that. If you are falling into social media habits or just kind of random mindless things in the evening, I just poked my eye. That's okay. I'm
Yeah.
all right. I'm all right. If-
Yeah. If you personally want to drive me crazy, just be on your phone all the time when I'm with you. We'll have a
Right.
short relationship.
Right. So, yeah. So since the phones have become more, if I pick up my phone, Mark will go turn on the TV or something like that to communicate that. Anyway, I want to tell you this story about a friend of ours we met during a personal enrichment opportunity. And they had come to this situation and their marriage was not doing good. They weren't doing good. They both felt really lonely in their relationship. And we found out that after they put their kids to bed, they were just doing their social media, Facebook, watching TV. They weren't communicating. And they learned a lot about each other during this weekend. And afterwards, they went home and started implementing what they learned, and they spent more time together. And within 6 months, they had a new job, they moved to a new city, and they were pregnant.
Yeah.
So they obviously were enjoying spending more time together. They made a lot of movement in their marriage and created that time to be together. So that's cool. What do you
I was just thinking of that example there. Got a new job. Bada bing, bada boom.
I know. I'm thinking they were both in one accord on the job change, but
Yeah.
anyway, it was a
Yeah.
great example of how your life can change if you start talking together. So over the years, we've been doing this conversation, and we do need to tell you that there are some, if you have your conversation, especially in the evenings, there are some caveats to kind of watch out. Okay, let's talk about this real quick, but I want to go back to kind of benefits of conversation. But in the evening, sometimes we're tired, really tired.
Yeah.
And if you do choose to have alcoholic beverages, if you have too many, how do you might become a different person. So watch out for being tired, or if you're really upset about something, or if you're having alcohol or you're having too much, because when you become
If you get angry when you drink,
don't do it that way. Right, exactly.
have your conversations at another time
in the
of day,
morning or
right?
at lunchtime, right? But we know that when we're tired, if the conversation gets heavy or heated at all and we're tired, things can spiral out of control quickly. And we want everybody to have healthy conversations, but also recognize that if you have conversation, it gets to that. We firmly believe that the best time to heal that anger is the next day.
Yeah.
We had the Bible says, don't let the sun go down on your anger. Right. But we're having these conversations after the sun's already gone down,
So-
mostly. So, yeah.
Well played.
Yeah. So we'll wait and have conversation the next day. And sometimes it takes a few days. If something comes out and people get angry, sometimes it takes a few days to work through that. And you don't have to necessarily address that all the time. You can kind of take some time. You might reveal issues that need to be worked on in your relationship, whether as a friend or as a couple.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any words of caution on that?
No, my brain was just going to the neuroscience behind the amygdala firing and anger and why it's a good idea to wait till the next day.
To talk about.
Sorry, I'm a neuroscience geek.
He is. Yep. So hopefully as we get through this, we'll have some conversation with a neuroscientist or somebody like that who can give us some more insight into conversation as well. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So over the years, Mark and I have now spent how many years having conversation? I mean, gosh, that's been like 20 years we've been having conversation. And one of the things that we want to bring to the conversation is information. So how do we get topics to bring? Because I mean, you only want to talk about your feelings so much. You want to talk about other things that are going on. So where do we get the information to talk?
Good podcasts, good news channels like NPR. In fact, they're one of the best for podcasts as well. So my favorites
NPR
are-
has lots of good podcasts.
Yeah. So just go there and see what interests you and start listening.
Start listening, start learning. Podcasts.
Start learning, reading books.
Reading books.
Yeah.
Yeah, pick up some books and share. You can even read the books together and create your own little book club.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, the podcasts lead to other books that I want
Yeah,
to read. So
it's true.
kind of a circular thing. So.
Podcasts introduce you to more interesting topics in
Yeah.
short form.
And a great question to ask your friends is, what are you reading?
What are you reading? Oh, or what podcasts are you listening to?
Or what podcast are you listening to? Just ask them, and you'll get more than you can do in a year. So.
Well, that's a great conversation starter. I mean, if most people are either reading books or listening to podcasts, but if they don't do one of those, they might watch a lot of TV. I mean, I'm always amazed when I go on Facebook and somebody say, "Hey, I need some new shows on Netflix," and woo, all the answers just pour in.
I was just gonna say, but if you ask your friend, where do you get all your best news and information? If they say Facebook, ask another friend. think we're developing a bit that listeners understand my dislike of social media.
Yeah, Mark's not a big person on social media. I'm on it more. He's not on it almost at all.
Yeah.
So, but that's okay. That helps him bring back some of the things I'm learning.
I follow a few people on Instagram. That's about it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
If you want to follow us on social media, we'll put those links in our bio as well. Whew. All right, so we've talked about having conversation in a couple situation, an intimate relationship. What about having conversation with your friends?
What about it?
Is it different?
No, it shouldn't really be any different.
Well, I disagree because in your intimate, you're going to be building up relational capital.
Right.
So over time, you'll start to feel safer with your spouse
Right.
or your significant other.
Well, you know what? My favorite friends are the ones that feel like family, though. So that's maybe why I responded that way.
Well,
I-
and
I-
your friends who feel like family, you've learned how to talk to them.
Right, right.
How do you talk to strangers?
Yeah, you don't have that safety net. You don't have that trust level. So, yeah, you got to work on that.
So how do you, as an introvert, I was going to say, how do you start a conversation? When we go to a party, Mark just leaves.
Well-
yes. And Mark has a physical pain journey with his back. So literally, if he
Well-
doesn't feel good and he's in himself, he
Yeah.
just leaves.
Yeah,
It's a
that's
thing.
a little about me. Small talk is not my strength. You would have jumped in the well, I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
So. But,
Okay. So as an introvert, if you want to have a conversation with someone, how do you start it?
Well, this is kind of a catch-22 because I dislike this question because it's a scapegoat for most people in conversations. But if you're a good conversationalist, it can lead to other good stuff. And that is what do you do? How do you spend most of your time? What interests you? But
But if you ask it, it's not what do you do for a living? Sometimes I ask, what do you like to do for a hobby? The people are thrown off when I ask that sometimes.
yeah, well, that's a good question.
Yeah.
I mean, both of them are good. So you never just ask, what do you do for a living? Because that's kind of the American scapegoat. It's really not about the person. But your next question should be, what do you like and don't like about your job? Or,
Yeah.
peel back a few layers. Don't leave it at, oh, you're
A nurse. Oh, you're a financial advisor.
yeah.
Yeah.
And if you're good at conversations, there's ways to ask questions that'll just find out a lot more about a person, even if the first question is, what do you do for a living?
Well, and even from that, let's say you talk to somebody and they're a nurse, then you say, oh my gosh, how has it been for you working during COVID? Or what have you learned during COVID? Dig in ask those little bit deeper questions.
Yeah.
I'll often start with, because we live in Middle Tennessee, outside of Nashville. We live in Franklin, Tennessee, and there have been a lot of transplants. So I'll often start with, where did you come from? What brought you here? Oh, well, are you enjoying it? Or what are you enjoying about being here? Remember this, when you're asking people questions, open-ended questions
Yes.
lead to more information.
Yeah. Don't ask questions that can be answered.
Yes or no. Right.
Yeah.
That doesn't encourage good conversation, because yes or no questions lead to decision and they end conversations.
Yeah.
But open-ended questions get more information
Right.
from people. So
That would be the difference between, what do you like about your job, and
what do you do for a living?
or do you like your job?
Oh, right. Do you like your job, or what do you like about your job? Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good example. So with friends, though, because I am so at ease with Mark, and I'm generally at ease just out in public, I talk a lot, I speak for a living. Sometimes I find when I get in conversations, I might be too open. So I also have to figure out how to read people and how to, I need to figure out how to read people and how to enter into the conversation that makes them feel comfortable. Yeah.
So what's our goal?
With this podcast?
Yeah, with the podcast.
Well, our goal is to invite you into our conversation. That's what we're going to do first, is we have some things that we have talked through over years and years. And because of our good conversation, we have comfort with some things that some people have trouble talking about. So the first thing we're going to do, especially because it's also convenient for us to start the podcast without having guests.
Right.
So we're going to start sharing a couple things about our story. And the first segment will be on Mark's chronic pain journey. He has pain in his back and feet and in his gut, and he has a vision problem. So we'll tell you a little bit about his story and then a little bit about my story through that as well, with the goal of helping people who are on that journey, because so many people are on that journey.
Right.
And then we're going to talk about our spiritual journey, because we grew up very, very much a part of the American Christian Church. And we've traveled around the world and analyzed kind of a lot of things, and have kind of been discussing a lot that we think might be good to share with whoever might care to listen.
Yeah. Well, and again, we've just come across so many people going through similar journeys that haven't
Right.
maybe given it quite as much thought time.
Well, they
we
may not have as much time to give thought as
Right,
you do,
right.
because you do have a lot of time to
Yeah.
think about things. So we're going to talk about that. And then as we move forward with an open conversation, our desire is to have people on as guests. If
Yeah.
you want to have an open conversation with us, with one of us or both of us, we're going to start setting up some of those. And that's kind of our phase 3 focus on it, because we believe that the road out of the divisive nature of our current American country, culture, and conversation is with real conversation. It's with asking open-ended questions and hearing people's stories and hearing people's hearts.
And focusing on what you agree on, not what you disagree
Yes,
on.
focusing on what you agree on and
Yeah.
not what you disagree on.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So that's where we're going. If you want to join us, and we do like to laugh,
Yep.
and we'll see where it goes. Let us know what you think, and look forward to we'll be putting up a few episodes with Mark's pain journey and
And yeah.
Monica's caregiver journey, because somebody said, Monica, you need to share your journey too. Right. I'm the best. I like asking questions.
Oh, you got a good story though too. So
Yep.
Yep.
We all have good stories.
We all have good stories.
We all have good stories. So we look forward to having you join us on an open conversation. Thanks for joining us today.
Talk to you later.
Okay. Bye.